He came to leave roses at his daughter's grave. Then his heart stopped. 2 boys were there crying, whispering, "Mommy, we miss you." And when they turned around, they had her eyes, his daughter's eyes. Gabriel Knight, the Mafia boss who controlled an empire built on fear, suddenly felt his knees go weak. Because if those boys were who he thought they were, his daughter had died keeping a secret that would destroy him. Before we go deeper, don't forget to subscribe. Because what happens next will shatter you. This isn't just another crime story. It's about a grandfather who never knew he had grandsons, and the choice that will cost him everything. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you don't miss the moment a ruthless man learns what real power is. The afternoon sun hung heavy over Pinewood Cemetery, casting long shadows across rows of marble and granite that marked lives finished too soon. Gabriel Knight's black Cadillac Escalade rolled to a quiet stop along the narrow path, gravel crunching beneath tires that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and honeysuckle, sweet and suffocating in a way that made breathing feel like work. Gabriel stepped out slowly, his polished Italian shoes meeting the stone walkway with deliberate precision. He wore a tailored blue suit, sharp enough to draw blood, the kind of outfit that announced power before he ever opened his mouth. Intricate tattoos crawled up his neck and spread across his hands, ink that told stories he'd never speak aloud. At 39, he looked younger than his years, the kind of dangerous handsome that made people remember his face long after they wished they could forget it. His jaw was set in that hard line people had learned not to question. Yet his hands, as he reached back into the car for the bouquet of white roses, trembled just enough to betray him. It had been 4 months since he'd lost Willow. 4 months since the hospital called to tell him his baby girl, his only child, the one pure thing in his corrupted world, was gone. Pneumonia, they said. Complications. She'd been sick for weeks before anyone thought to tell him, and by the time he'd gotten the message, she was already cold in a morgue 3 hours away. Gabriel had been 16 when Willow was born, a baby himself, really, already running with the wrong crowd, already making the choices that would define the rest of his life. Her mother, Candace, had been his high school girlfriend, the kind of sweet church girl who thought she could save him. She couldn't. When Willow was 2, Candace took her and disappeared, determined to keep their daughter away from the violence Gabriel was drowning in. For years, he'd only seen Willow in supervised visits and brief holidays, watching her grow up in photographs and awkward phone calls. But when Candace died in a car accident and Willow was 17, she'd come back to him. For one beautiful year, they'd tried to be a real family. Gabriel had promised her he'd go straight, get clean, build something legitimate. But the streets don't let you go that easily. When Willow turned 18, she'd left. Walked out of his penthouse with a suitcase and tears streaming down her face, begging him one last time to choose her over the empire he'd built. He'd watched her go, a glass of Hennessy in his hand, telling himself she'd come back when she grew up and understood how the world really worked. She never came back. He hadn't known she'd changed her name back to Mitchell, her mother's maiden name. Hadn't known she'd moved to some small town called Maplewood. The funeral had been arranged by a woman named Shonda who'd called herself Willow's best friend and looked at Gabriel like he was the devil himself. The obituary had said, "Beloved daughter, devoted mother." Those last 2 words had meant nothing to him then. Willow didn't have children. She was only 23. He would have known, wouldn't he? But the guilt had followed him through sleepless nights and silent mornings, through meetings where he couldn't focus and money that didn't mean anything anymore. It sat in his chest like a stone until finally, he couldn't carry it alone. So here he was, 4 months late, making the drive from Atlanta to this quiet cemetery where nobody knew his name or feared his reputation. He told himself he just needed to say goodbye, to tell her he was sorry, to leave flowers at a grave he should have been standing beside from the beginning. He walked slowly through the cemetery, his 2 bodyguards, Jerome and Malik, staying back by the vehicles. Even Gabriel Knight understood some walks had to be taken alone. The last time he'd been in a cemetery, Willow had been 17, standing beside him as they buried her mother. He'd held her hand and promised her she'd never be alone, that he'd always protect her, that nothing would ever hurt her as long as he was breathing. That was one more promise he'd shattered. He found her grave beneath a magnolia tree, its branches swaying gently in the breeze, white petals scattered across the grass like snow. The headstone was simple, gray granite with clean lettering. Willow Grace Mitchell. Beloved daughter, loving mother. She chose love over everything. The words, loving mother, hit him like a fist to the throat. Willow didn't have children. She was 23 when she died. She would have been 19, maybe 20 when she... No, he would have known. Someone would have told him. But Gabriel never made it to the headstone, because kneeling in front of it, small and heartbreakingly fragile against the vast sprawl of graves, were two little boys. They couldn't have been more than 4 years old, dressed in matching black t-shirts and jeans, their small shoulders shaking with the kind of sobs that come from a place too deep for children to understand. One of them clutched a handful of wildflowers, dandelions and clover, the kind kids pick because they think they're beautiful. The other held a wrinkled piece of paper covered in crayon drawings. They were whispering to the headstone, voices soft and broken, wiping their faces with the backs of their hands the way children do when they don't know anyone's watching. "Mommy, we learned our colors today," one of them said, his voice cracking. "I drew you a rainbow. Miss Shonda says you're watching from heaven," the other whispered. "Can you see us, Mommy? We miss you so much." Gabriel's breath caught in his chest. His hand tightened around the roses until a thorn bit into his palm, drawing blood he didn't feel. Something about them made his heart seize, something familiar, something impossible. He took a step forward. Gravel shifted under his shoe. Both boys turned sharply, their tear-streaked faces lifting toward him with identical expressions of fear and surprise. And Gabriel Knight's entire world collapsed, because staring back at him were his daughter's eyes. Willow's warm brown eyes. Her nose. Her mouth. The same dimple in the left cheek she'd had since she was a baby. These boys didn't just look like her. They were her. His vision blurred. His knees buckled slightly, and he had to lock them to stay standing. The roses fell from his hand, scattering across the grass like broken promises. The older boy, or maybe they were twins, he couldn't tell, stood up first, stepping protectively in front of his brother, small fists clenched at his sides, even though he barely came up to Gabriel's waist. "Who are you?" the boy asked, voice shaking but defiant. Gabriel opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His throat had closed. His chest felt like it was caving in. Loving mother. Willow had children. She'd had sons when she was 19, maybe 20. His grandsons. And she'd hidden them from him for 4 years. She'd died hiding them from him. The second boy peeked out from behind his brother, his tear-filled eyes studying Gabriel with the kind of innocent curiosity that cut deeper than any blade. "Do you know our mommy?" he asked softly. Gabriel's hands were shaking now, trembling so violently he had to shove them into his pockets. He'd stood in rooms with men holding guns to his head and never flinched. He'd built an empire on fear and control, had made grown men beg for mercy without blinking. But two little boys, 4 years old, barely out of diapers, with his daughter's face had just brought him to his knees. "Yeah," Gabriel finally managed, his voice rough and broken. "Yeah, I knew her." The older boy's expression shifted slightly, some of the fear melting into something sadder, something that looked too much like grief for a child to carry. "Are you sad too?" he asked. Gabriel's jaw clenched. His vision blurred again, and he realized with horror that he was crying. Tears he hadn't let himself shed in 4 months were suddenly pouring down his face, hot and unstoppable. "Yeah, little man," he whispered. "I'm sad too." The boy considered this, then took a small step forward, still holding his brother's hand. "Miss Shonda says Mommy's in heaven now. She says Mommy loved us more than anything in the whole world." "She did," Gabriel said, his voice breaking. Because even if Willow had hidden these boys from him, even if she'd spent 4 years keeping this secret, he knew without question that every choice she'd made had been out of love. "She loved you more than anything." "What's your name?" the second boy asked, wiping his nose with his sleeve. Gabriel swallowed hard. He'd been called a lot of things in his life. Boss. Knight. The name that made people look away when he walked into a room. But standing there, staring at his grandsons for the first time, none of those names felt right. Gabriel, he said quietly. My name is Gabriel. I'm Aiden, the older boy said, then pointed to his brother. And that's Evan. We're 4. Well, Evan's 4. I'm 4.5. Aiden and Evan. His grandsons had names. They had personalities. They had memories of their mother that he'd never share. They had a whole life Willow had built for them, away from him, away from everything he represented. And now, standing in the shadow of his daughter's grave, Gabriel Knight understood exactly what the title on her headstone meant. She chose love over everything. She'd chosen them over him. She'd protected them from him. And now, he was going to have to figure out why, and whether he could ever become the kind of man who deserved to know them. Because looking at Aiden and Evan, seeing his daughter's face reflected in theirs, Gabriel knew one thing with absolute certainty. His world had just collapsed, and he had no idea how to build it back. Gabriel followed Shonda's silver Honda Accord through the winding streets of Maplewood, his Escalade feeling too big, too loud, too much for this quiet neighborhood of chain-link fences and swing sets. Jerome and Malik trailed behind in the second vehicle, silent shadows he couldn't shake even when he wanted to. Shonda's house was small, painted yellow with white shutters, the kind of place where people knew their neighbors' names. She stood on the porch waiting, arms crossed, her expression somewhere between grief and rage. The boys were inside. He could hear their voices through the screen door, asking for juice boxes. You need to leave, Shonda said before Gabriel even made it up the steps. You've done enough damage. Those boys, Gabriel started, his voice rough, are Willow's sons, Aiden and Evan Brooks. And no, you don't get to know them. Shonda's eyes blazed with the kind of fury only a best friend could carry. Willow made me promise, Gabriel. Made me swear on everything I love that if something happened to her, I'd keep them away from you. The words hit like bullets. Gabriel's hand gripped the porch railing. Why? Why? Shonda's laugh was bitter. Because she knew what you are. She knew your world doesn't let innocence survive. She got pregnant at 19 by some boy who disappeared, and instead of coming to you for help, she'd rather work 2 jobs and sleep on my couch than let you anywhere near those babies. Gabriel's jaw clenched. I would have protected them. Protected them? Shonda stepped closer, her voice dropping to something cold and cutting. Like you protected her? Willow spent her whole life running from your name, Gabriel. Every time she heard sirens, she thought they were coming for her. Every unknown number made her panic. She changed her last name, moved 3 times, all to make sure nobody connected her to you. She paused, her voice breaking. Your protection is what killed her. The stress, the fear, the nights she couldn't sleep wondering if one of your enemies would find her. Pneumonia took her body, but you took her peace years ago. If you think people who put power over their own children deserve a second chance, comment, everyone can change. Or maybe you think Gabriel should just walk away. Let us know. Gabriel felt something crack inside his chest, sharp and irreversible. He'd built an empire thinking it made him powerful, thinking it meant he could protect the people he loved. But standing on this porch, staring at the woman who'd been more family to his daughter than he ever was, he understood the truth. His power hadn't protected anyone. It had been the threat all along. She left a letter, Shonda finally said, her voice tired. Sealed. Said to give it to you only if you ever found the boys. She disappeared inside, returning with an envelope that had his name written in Willow's handwriting. Gabriel's hands shook as he took it. Inside that envelope was either his daughter's forgiveness or her final condemnation. He wasn't sure which one terrified him more. Gabriel didn't open the letter until he was back in Atlanta, alone in his penthouse that suddenly felt like a mausoleum. The city lights glittered below, a kingdom he'd built with blood and broken bones, and none of it mattered anymore. He poured himself a drink he wouldn't touch, sat in the leather chair that had witnessed 1,000 deals, and finally broke the seal. The handwriting was shaky, written in the last days of her life. Daddy, if you're reading this, it means Shonda kept her promise and you found Aiden and Evan. It means my worst fear and my deepest hope both came true. I need you to understand something. I didn't hide them because I hated you. I hid them because I loved them too much to lose them the way I lost you. Do you remember when I was 7 and those men came to our house looking for you? Mama grabbed me and we hid in the bathtub for 3 hours while they tore our apartment apart. I was so scared I couldn't breathe. You came home and told me everything was fine, that you'd handled it, that I was safe. But I never felt safe again. When I got pregnant, I was terrified. Not because I was 19 and alone, but because I knew if you found out, you'd pull me back into that world. You'd surround my boys with bodyguards and bulletproof cars and teach them that power is the only thing that matters. You'd love them the way you loved me, with everything you had, but you'd drown them in violence while calling it protection. So I chose different. I chose peace. I chose to let them grow up normal, even if it meant growing up without you. But Daddy, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And those boys need someone. So here's what I'm begging you. Let them be your reason to change. Not your reason to fight harder or build bigger or hurt more people to keep them safe. Let them be your reason to walk away from everything you built. Don't let them inherit your violence. Choose them over your empire. Choose them over your pride. Choose them over everything, the way I wish you'd chosen me. I love you. I forgive you. Now prove I wasn't wrong too. Willow. The letter fell from Gabriel's hands. His chest heaved with sobs he'd held back for 4 months, for 23 years, maybe for his whole damn life. He doubled over in that chair, a king in an empty castle, and wept like the broken father he'd always been. Hit subscribe if you believe a man can change, or keep scrolling if you think Gabriel's too far gone. We'll know where you stand. Jerome found him an hour later, still crying, Willow's letter clutched against his chest like a lifeline. Boss. Jerome's voice was uncertain. He'd never seen Gabriel like this. Gabriel looked up, his face wet, his eyes red. Call everyone, he said, his voice destroyed but steady. I'm burning it all down. The DNA test came back in 72 hours. Gabriel sat in his office staring at the results, even though he'd known the truth the moment he saw their faces. 99.7% probability of biological relationship. Science confirmed what his heart already knew. Aiden and Evan Brooks were his blood. He called Shonda 3 times before she answered. The conversation was tense, clipped, but she finally agreed to one meeting. Public place. Daytime. 1 hour. And if the boys seemed uncomfortable, it was over. Gabriel found himself at Riverside Park on a Wednesday afternoon, watching from a bench as Shonda walked toward him with Aiden and Evan holding her hands. They wore matching red shirts and light-up sneakers, their faces curious but cautious. Boys, this is Mr. Gabriel, Shonda said carefully. He was a friend of your mommy's. Aiden studied him with those serious brown eyes, too knowing for a 4-year-old. Why do you look so sad? He asked. Gabriel's throat tightened. No one had asked him that question in 20 years. People assumed his hardness was strength, never stopping to wonder what lived underneath. I miss your mommy too, Gabriel said quietly. Evan stepped closer, tilting his head. Did you love her? More than anything in this world. Something in Gabriel's voice must have rang true because Evan climbed onto the bench beside him, small and trusting in a way that terrified Gabriel more than any weapon ever had. Miss Shonda says it's okay to be sad, Evan said. She says Mommy would want us to remember the happy stuff too. Aiden sat on Gabriel's other side, and for a moment, the 3 of them just sat there in the afternoon sun. Gabriel felt something crack open in his chest, something he'd buried under years of violence and control. When Evan leaned against his arm, Gabriel's face softened into something he hadn't felt in years. A smile, rusty and uncertain, but real. You want to see me do a cartwheel? Aiden asked, already jumping off the bench. Yeah, Gabriel said, his voice rough. Yeah, little man. Show me. What he didn't see was the black sedan parked 3 rows back, or the man inside taking photos with a telephoto lens. By nightfall, those photos were on Darius Jenkins's desk in a warehouse across town. Darius studied them with a cold smile, his gold rings glinting under the fluorescent lights. Gabriel Knight has grandkids, Darius said to his lieutenant, tapping the photo of Gabriel smiling at the two boys. And he's going soft. His lieutenant frowned. What are you thinking? Darius leaned back in his chair, his smile widening into something cruel. I'm thinking we just found our leverage. Comment, protect the innocent, if you can't stand people like Darius Jenkins who'd use children as weapons. Let's see who really stands for what's right. It was supposed to be a simple trip to get ice cream. Gabriel had convinced Shonda to let him take the boys for an hour, promising to stay in public places to keep them safe. They were buckled in the back seat of his Escalade, arguing over whether chocolate or vanilla was better, when Gabriel's eyes caught the black Charger 3 cars back. Same Charger that had been parked outside Shonda's house that morning. His jaw tightened. He took a sudden right turn, watching his rearview mirror. The Charger followed. Mr. Gabriel, you missed the ice cream place, Aiden said from the back. Change of plans, little man. Gabriel's voice stayed calm even as his heart rate spiked. We're playing a super spy mission. You boys ever play spy? Evan's eyes lit up. Like James Bond. Exactly like James Bond. I need you both to hold on tight and stay quiet. Can you do that for me? Both boys nodded, suddenly serious, sensing something in Gabriel's tone even if they didn't understand it. Gabriel punched the gas, weaving through traffic with the precision of someone who'd spent half his life running from or chasing trouble. He took a hard left into a parking garage, tires squealing, then killed the lights and backed into a corner space between two vans. Shoo, he whispered, watching the entrance. The Charger prowled past, slow and searching, then finally drove on. Gabriel waited 5 more minutes, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, before he started the engine and took the long way back to Shonda's, checking his mirrors every 10 seconds. When he pulled up, Shonda took one look at his face and knew. What happened? Gabriel waited until the boys were inside, distracted with cartoons, before he told her. You need to leave, Shonda said, her voice shaking with fury. You need to get away from them. This is exactly what Willow was afraid of. You're the curse she spent her whole life running from, and now you've brought it right to their doorstep. Shonda, get out, Gabriel. Get out before you get them killed. Gabriel drove to Pinewood Cemetery as the sun set, his hands still trembling with adrenaline and rage. He knelt at Willow's grave, pressing his tattooed hand against the cold granite. I hear you, baby girl, he whispered. I understand now. You were right about everything. His voice broke. But I'm not running. I'm going to tear it all apart. Every piece of the world that makes them unsafe. I'm going to burn down everything I built so they can have what you wanted for them. He stood, his shadow long across the grass. I'm choosing them. I swear to God, I'm choosing them. And Gabriel Knight meant every word. Gabriel called the meeting at his warehouse on a Tuesday night. 15 of his most trusted lieutenants sat around the table, men who'd built fortunes on his orders, men who'd buried bodies without asking questions. I'm out, Gabriel said simply. Effective immediately, I'm dismantling the operation. The room erupted. Voices overlapped, angry and confused, but Gabriel raised his hand and the noise died. The drug operations go to Marcus. The transport routes to Deshawn. The real estate gets liquidated and divided. I'm giving you 2 weeks to restructure without me. Tyrone, his consigliere for 12 years, stood up slowly. Boss, can we talk? Alone. Gabriel nodded, and the room cleared. You've lost your mind, Tyrone said once they were alone. You know what this looks like? Weakness. Blood in the water. Darius Jenkins is already circling, and now you're handing him an invitation. I know what I'm doing. Do you? Tyrone stepped closer. You've spent 20 years building this empire. Men respect you because you're untouchable. You walk away now, you're just another target. Then I'm a target. Gabriel's voice was steel. I made a promise to my daughter. Those boys don't need a king, Tyrone. They need a grandfather who won't get them killed. They need a grandfather who's alive. Then I better move fast. Over the next 2 weeks, Gabriel systematically dismantled everything. He sold off the illegal gambling operations, shut down the chop shops, transferred the construction company to legitimate ownership. Every asset that carried blood money got liquidated, the profits divided among his crew or funneled into untraceable accounts. His penthouse felt emptier each day as he erased the evidence of who he'd been. The final step came on a Sunday morning. Gabriel stood in his living room as Jerome and Malik moved through the penthouse, removing every weapon they could find. Pistols from the safe, the shotgun behind the bookshelf, the knives that weren't meant for cooking, the brass knuckles in the desk drawer. "Boss, you sure about this?" Jerome asked, holding a .45 that had saved Gabriel's life twice. "You're defenseless." Gabriel looked at the pile of weapons on his dining room table. 20 years of protection turned into evidence of everything he needed to leave behind. "No," Gabriel said quietly. "I'm finally free. If you believe a man deserves a second chance to make things right, hit that like button. Only people who think violence is the only answer won't. Don't be like Darius Jenkins." Tyrone watched from the doorway, shaking his head. "God help you, Gabriel," he muttered. "Because I don't think anyone else can." They came at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday, 6 men in black masks with enough firepower to start a war. Gabriel had moved Aiden and Evan into his penthouse 2 days earlier after Shonda got a threatening phone call. She'd finally agreed, terrified, that the boys weren't safe anywhere else. Gabriel woke to the sound of glass shattering downstairs. His instincts kicked in before his mind caught up. He was already moving, grabbing the boys from the guest room, their small bodies heavy with sleep. "Mr. Gabriel?" Aiden mumbled, confused. "Shoo, remember the spy game? We're playing again. Stay quiet." Gunshots echoed through the penthouse. Gabriel's heart hammered as he carried Evan and pulled Aiden down the hallway toward the panic room. He'd sworn he'd dismantled everything, but he'd kept this. One reinforced room, one last defense. Tyrone appeared at the top of the stairs, his suit jacket torn, blood on his shirt. "It's Jenkins's crew. 6 of them. They know you're unarmed, boss. Get in the panic room with the boys." "No." Tyrone pressed something into Gabriel's hand. A pistol, the one he'd kept hidden against orders. "You get them safe. I'll buy you time." "Tyrone, I've been with you 12 years, Gabriel. Let me do this." Tyrone's eyes were steady, resigned. "You're choosing right. Let me help you finish it." Before Gabriel could argue, Tyrone disappeared down the stairs. Gunshots erupted, louder now, closer. Gabriel shoved the boys into the panic room, sealed the door, and held them as they cried against his chest. It's okay," he whispered, though nothing was okay. The shooting stopped after 10 minutes that felt like hours. Silence, then sirens. Police. Ambulances. Gabriel opened the door to find his penthouse destroyed and Tyrone's body at the bottom of the stairs, 3 of Jenkins's crew dead beside him. The police came first, then social services. LaToya Henderson was a middle-aged black woman with kind eyes and a clipboard that might as well have been a death sentence. She knelt beside Aiden and Evan, checking them for injuries while Gabriel stood handcuffed, surrounded by cops. "Mr. Knight, I understand you're their grandfather, but this environment," she gestured to the bullet holes, the blood, the chaos. "These children cannot stay here. For their safety, I'm placing them in emergency protective custody." "No." Gabriel's voice broke. "Please. I was trying to protect them." "I believe you," LaToya said gently. "But good intentions don't make children safe. The court will decide their placement." Gabriel watched, powerless, as they took Aiden and Evan away. Subscribe if you think the system should protect children, not punish families trying to change, or don't, if you think Gabriel deserves this. Aiden looked back, crying, reaching for him. "Grandpa," and Gabriel's world collapsed all over again. The courtroom was smaller than Gabriel expected, fluorescent lights humming overhead, wooden benches worn smooth by years of broken families. He sat alone at the defendant's table wearing a simple gray suit, no jewelry, no bodyguards, just a man fighting for his grandsons. Across the aisle, the state attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Owens, laid out her case with clinical precision. Gabriel Knight's criminal history, the attack on his home, Tyrone's death, the environment of violence that had traumatized two 4-year-old boys. Your Honor, Mr. Knight may claim he's changed, but leopards don't change their spots. These children deserve stability, not a grandfather learning how to be peaceful while bodies pile up around him. Judge Lorraine Mitchell, a black woman in her 60s with silver locks and reading glasses perched on her nose, turned to Gabriel. Mr. Knight, you're representing yourself. Do you have anything to say? Gabriel stood slowly. His hands weren't shaking anymore. He'd faced this moment in his nightmares for weeks, but now that it was here, he felt only clarity. Your Honor, I'm not here to tell you I'm innocent. I'm not. I've spent 20 years building an empire on violence, thinking power meant protection. I was wrong. His voice was steady, raw. My daughter Willow knew it. She hid my grandsons from me because she understood something I didn't, that the world I built would destroy them. He pulled Willow's letter from his jacket pocket, the paper creased from being read 100 times. She wrote me a letter before she died. She said, "Let them be your reason to change. Choose them over everything you built." So I did. I dismantled my entire operation, sold everything, removed every weapon from my home. I thought if I changed fast enough, I could keep them safe. His voice cracked, but I was too slow. My past caught up before I could outrun it, and a good man died protecting us. Tyrone gave his life buying me time to save Aiden and Evan. And now they're in foster care, and I'm here begging you for a chance I don't deserve. Judge Mitchell's expression was unreadable. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Your Honor. I'm asking for the chance to prove my daughter right. To prove that a man can choose differently. To be the grandfather she believed I could be, even when I didn't believe it myself. The courtroom was silent. Judge Mitchell removed her glasses, studying Gabriel for a long moment. Mr. Knight, I've seen a lot of men stand in this courtroom and promise change. Most of them are lying to themselves as much as to me. She paused. But I've also read the reports. You liquidated millions in assets. You testified against your former associates. You made yourself a target to protect these boys. She leaned forward. I'm granting you custody under strict conditions. Mandatory counseling. Supervised visits for 6 months. One misstep, and they're removed permanently. Do you understand? Gabriel's knees nearly buckled with relief. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Comment family over everything if you believe Gabriel deserves this second chance, because people who think criminals can't change are part of the problem. Don't thank me, Judge Mitchell said. Prove me right. The warehouse sat empty on the industrial edge of Atlanta, the last piece of Gabriel's empire that hadn't been sold or surrendered. He stood in the doorway at sunset, a gas can in his hand, looking at the space where he'd made decisions that ruined lives, including his own. Jerome stood beside him, one of the few who'd stayed loyal through everything. You sure about this, boss? Gabriel poured gasoline across the concrete floor, the smell sharp and final. I'm not the boss anymore, Jerome. Haven't been for a while. He struck the match and dropped it. Flames erupted, hungry and bright, consuming the last evidence of Gabriel Knight, the kingpin. He watched it burn, feeling nothing but relief. What now? Jerome asked. Gabriel smiled, tired but real. Now I go home. Home was a 3-bedroom ranch house in Maplewood, 15 minutes from Shonda's place, with a backyard and a swing set Gabriel had installed himself. No marble floors or bulletproof windows. No panic rooms or hidden safes. Just a house where 2 little boys could be loud and messy and safe. Gabriel woke up early now, not to take meetings, but to make breakfast. The pancakes were usually burnt. He was still learning, but Aiden and Evan ate them anyway, drowning them in syrup and telling him about their dreams. Grandpa, can we play dragons? Evan asked, syrup on his chin. After breakfast, little man. Gabriel found himself on his hands and knees in the backyard most afternoons, roaring like a dragon while Aiden and Evan squealed and defeated him with foam swords. His knees hurt. His back ached. He'd never been happier. At night, after tucking them in and reading stories about superheroes who chose peace, Gabriel would sit on the porch and look at Willow's photo on his phone. I'm doing it, baby girl, he'd whisper. I'm choosing them. He realized something in those quiet moments that 20 years of power never taught him. Love was the only thing that had ever made him human. Not the money, not the fear, not the empire. Just this. Two little boys who called him Grandpa and trusted him to keep them safe, not with guns or violence, but with burnt pancakes and backyard dragons and the kind of peace his daughter had died believing he could find. Gabriel Knight had lost his kingdom, but he'd finally found his family, and that was worth everything. If you believe love is stronger than any empire, drop a like and subscribe, because people like Darius Jenkins will never understand that. Be on the right side of this story. Hit that bell so you don't miss what happens when broken men choose to heal. This is where real power begins.